being here for this special called meeting. I'm standing in for our board chair, Rob Wallace, who is actually on WebEx this evening, joining us virtually. We'll go ahead and I would like to ask for an amendment to the agenda to add a section for public commentary, since we had discussed that previously at the two town halls. That's not included on the publicly produced agenda, so I would like to make a motion to add that section.
Second.
All in favor? Okay. Okay, great. So without objection, we will approve the agenda as amended. Seeing no objections, we'll go forward.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice Chair. And I think I heard the chairman, Mr. Wallace, you are able to hear us?
I can.
Wonderful, thank you. So welcome, everybody. Glad that you could be here. Hope everyone had a great spring break, and we didn't get the warm weather we wanted, but or the dry weather we all wanted, but it was certainly nice to have a week off. We're going to begin tonight with a couple of short presentations, and then we'll get to the heart of the matter, which is our issue with our Bethany zone. And so I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Hopkins, and we put this on the agenda tonight because a lot of what we heard during this conversation about Bethany zoning, and a lot of what we heard throughout our bond referendum, was that we wanted to look at our residency requirements to make sure that everything that we're doing to make sure students who attend Clover School District actually live in Clover School District needs to be as tight as it can be. And so Dr. Hopkins has done some work on that, and I'd like for him to present that to the board. The timeliness is important because we begin registration as early as this coming week, and so we need to have some new things in place. I'll let him turn that over to him.
Thank you, Dr. Quinn, Ms. Marr, and the rest of the board. Thank you. I want to just sort of set this up. As we heard through many of the discussions leading up through the bond process and in our discussions about growing enrollment, we heard concerns about people attending Clover that should not be attending our schools. We began earlier this year, the social workers and some of the administrators began looking at some potential changes to residency to tighten that up. I'll also add that this year there were a couple of situations where we had to remove students from the schools, and we would like to be able to prevent that from occurring if possible. When Courtney came on board as our sort of fill-in attendance officer position, which he will take next year, he began to do some research. He and I looked at not only some local districts, but some districts far off that have some residency issues, that have some embattled lines, so to speak, and what they do to help prevent people crossing lines. Probably the most likely comparison was Fort Mill in South Carolina, but he actually found some very similar situations in Ohio with some contacts that he had. And it came down to one of the bigger issues is how we allow proof of residency to occur. I included the current proof of residency standards along with a draft of what we will be looking to change. And what we have found that some of the common proofs of residency in terms of solely a utility bill, an insurance bill, or some type of mail, and even a driver's license does not always accurately depict. Some of those are easily, I want to say, not forged, but you can get hold of or get your name in a utility bill easier than you may think. In some other discussions, we have found that there's a designation for residents of Clover School District that if you're the primary occupant of your home, which is your primary designation, your primary place of residence, not a second home, not a rental home, what we will begin to require is proof that this is your primary occupied home. And when is your primary occupied home? That qualifies you for the rebate that we see on our tax bill for school operations from Act 388. And it means that that is where you live. That is your primary residence. So we have identified that and have come up with a tutorial. Anybody that owns property can look up their property and get this designation from a website that's publicly accessible for everybody from the county, yorkcountygov.com. And so we will require that to show that it is your primary place of residence. And so for residents, that will take a big load, hopefully, off of the ease of proving that you are truly a Clover resident. There are a few obstacles with renters. We have two classes of renters, renters that rent from a commercial organization, a large apartment complex, and then we have private renters that rent from a homeowner or living with somebody. Those require some different circumstances. Right now, that's a little easy to get around too. So we're going to require not only proof that the renter, proves that they are renting there through lease, receipt, and or utility bill, et cetera, but that the owner of the home is the actual owner of the home whose name is on that lease. So there are things we're doing to tighten that up to ensure that we are serving our residents and not residents that are coming in from other places. Brian and I will be meeting tomorrow, to go over these changes. I'm sorry I got a little behind with my PowerPoint slide. You can see the commercial renters versus the private renters that I mentioned. A little bit different designation there and what those requirements are to ensure that we've got proper residency shown. And then the homeowners, they must prove primary residence. And then if you're residing with someone, there is a legal affidavit that must be signed. That process will not change. One thing that we will not take is vehicle taxes now, because those don't necessarily show your address as well. So I just wanted you to be aware that we're doing everything we can from the administrative side to ensure that we're serving just the people we're supposed to, and try to minimize the effort that we have to extend to identify those that are not in compliance, and then ultimately, subsequently, get them out of the district when that case warrants it. So no approval necessary. Wanted you to be sure that you were understanding this, and we're going to be communicating this to the community ASAP, and this will go with our InfoSnap registration process. Any questions that anyone has regarding proof of residency?
Dr. Hopkins, quickly, can you talk about, because I heard this question come up a lot in these discussions as well. Let's assume all this works out. There are a few folks that are maybe taking advantage of our reputation as a district, and they need to go back to their home district. What is that process like once you find somebody that you notify them, obviously, and then from there?
It is the most
mid-year,
recent.
I assume.
The most recent. Very rarely has a year gone by where we haven't had to do some of that. The first is notification from the school that there's a potential issue, and there are many different ways that they get that information. They contact our office, Ms. Chisholm. We begin to investigate. I have made home visits. Ms. Chisholm has made home visits to see if we can, prove that they are living there or show that they're not. Follow up with all the documentation we can. We have used tax records, like I just mentioned, in some cases to discover this. But there's a whole investigation that we go through to make sure we know that they're not living there, and give them every opportunity to produce the documentation they need. And then the principal is generally the one that communicates to them that they will no longer be enrolled.
That happens mid-year. They're then directed to the district they should be in,
Correct.
and then that's a fairly...
Now, there is board policy that allows for students in certain situations, once we get through the mid-year point, that they can complete the year at their school and also seniors can complete their senior year at Clover High if they finish their junior year. So there are some exceptions to that.
Okay. Thank you.
And some of those are state law required with the seniors.
Right. And Dr. Quinn and I mentioned earlier, this may become a moot point in a year or two with the school choice plan coming on, but in the short term, feel like we need to do this given the enrollment concerns that we have.
And what Dr. Hopkins means is the House has passed parents' choice legislation. So it could mean that we have to have inter-district choice and intra-district choice. So we'll see if it gets through the Senate first,
When are they proposing that would take effect?
next year.
We would begin to collect these new proof of residencies with registrations this coming year.
As in August.
And I've spoken to principals who would supply a place on-site at registration for people to be able to access that information from the county.
Meaning that people potentially as early as next year would be able to choose which elementary school, middle school, or...
If there were space in the school. So the district has to publish where they have space, but yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. We'll see you back in just a few minutes. This next item is Mr. Dillon. He's going to come forward. You will remember earlier this year, we passed a new calendar for next year, and we told the community that we would come back earlier than usual and go ahead and submit a 2024-25 calendar so the community would have lots of notice. And so we would have 2 calendars published next year and the year after. So Mr. Dillon has begun the preliminary work on that. This is just for discussion tonight, nothing for first reading yet. We're just talking about it, so I'll turn it over to him.
All right, good evening. Good evening, Madam Vice Chair, members of the board, Dr. Quinn, thank you. You'll see your handout, you have draft A on one side and draft B on the other side. That is 24-25 calendar. As you know, we put a lot of work into moving towards a modified balanced calendar for the 23-24 school year. We did that back October, November, December, and passed that calendar earlier this school year, so that has passed, and what you have now is 24-25. So going into discussing this, what we've already done, and we've already received feedback from district leadership, the administrative teams from each of the school and the district level, and we've also spoken with the teacher forum as well to get their feedback on these drafts. Additionally, we're going to have feedback from the remainder of district staff with a survey of them beginning tomorrow, and then we actually have the parent advisory committee in later this week, Thursday, where we're going to go over more detail again with our friends from the Parent Advisory Committee. So we'll get even further detail from them. So looking deeper into the calendars, you have there the start date of draft A is a little earlier. We talked about this in the discussions last year, where it kind of might be a 2-part phase-in, where we went to August 8th for next year, and then a little bit further this year. So one draft is Thursday, August 1st. You see an intersession October 7th through the 11th. And the thing about the intersession on draft A is that is an uninterrupted intersession. It is 5 full days for staff and students there. Then we would have work in that time for students that need to come in and seek some extra assistance during that time. Then Thanksgiving is the typical 3 days. This is an election year, 2024. So that is built in the first Tuesday following first Monday in November. So that is listed on there. And then you have the holiday winter break from December 21st through January the 6th. All students returning on the 7th, and staff have a work day on the 6th. Intercession right after President's Day, like we did in the calendar that we just approved. We are looking at 2 different options for spring break. Right now, what you'll see on there is the 14th through the 18th. I'm in discussions with our staff, as well as the PIOs from York, from Rock Hill, and from Fort Mill, because we've always worked together to have spring breaks on those same weeks. So we're working on that. Fort Mill's calendar is coming up soon. Rock Hill's looking to approve theirs in May, June timeframe, and then York will be a little bit further behind. But the goal is, as always, is to have those spring breaks be similar dates. So you could see an adjustment there, but right now I have that on the 14th through the 18th. And then graduation and last day of school, Thursday, May 29th on draft A. Any questions on A?
You might want to remind them about those PD days and which one's required for us to leave.
Okay. The PD days, we are required we have a 190-day contract, so you'll see a combination of 10 work days and 10 PD days. Those are represented by the orange and the purple days. So we made a minor adjustment this past year to go 6 work days and 4 PD days for the staff. The state requires a minimum of 3 PD days, so we kind of split that difference between what we were doing and what the requirement from the state is. So that's what those are. And then the required one in October is October 14th is a Monday. It is the OEC Professional Development Day. That is something that all of the tri-counties do. York, Chester, and Lancaster get together for combined PD amongst them and the various groups, the related arts and the administration, and so that's what that day designates. And so that date is the one PD day that is set for us, and that's why that is in October. That is draft A. On draft B, we have a start date on August the 5th, and where that comes into play is because we're calling modified balance, it's important to have that 90-90 split. Draft A has that, draft B does have that, but that came into play with the start date being on the Monday. If we're going to call it modified balance, if we're going to work to do the things that we said we're going to do, have 45 days, and do those sorts of things, it was important to move that to the Monday, despite the goal of starting not on a Monday. That's a big thing that our elementary staff has asked for. That's part of why we had the two drafts. But with the election day and how the other days have to fall, we did have to sacrifice that on draft B, and that's why Monday, August 5th is the start. You'll see at the intercession there in October, it is kind of interrupted. One is an OEC day, the OEC Professional Development Day, and then the other is a work day. And then there's 3 full days for the rest of the week. So on that one, for the intercession work that we would do with students, we'd probably look at having them come in on Wednesday, Thursday, and having a longer front end of that intercession break. Then we have the election day on the 5th again, 3 days in November, a healthy break for winter break, 2 weeks, coming back with a day for staff on the 6th, and then students return on the 7th, the same intercession, the same spring break, and then the same end of the year, May 29th. Any questions on these to discuss?
Just doing a quick count on draft B. We have 90 days in first semester and 89 in second semester.
All right, I'll verify those 100%.
Okay.
I did make some adjustments on there, move some things around after some things, so I'll just verify again, and we'll
But
make
we
sure
want it
that we're
90-90.
fully accurate.
It should be 90-90.
It should be
so-
90-90.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, it should be
There may be-
90-90, and we'll make sure that it is 90-90 if it's not on there.
I wasn't trying to nitpick. I just,
No, it's fine. That's a mistake we don't want to make. I know before I started, we had one year where it was approved with one less day and had to make an amendment, so that's something we don't want to ever have
I
to do.
knew it was still a work in progress.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. I'll verify that 100% and make sure that that's accurate. Any other questions on
I
the
would just say,
draft?
just as a comment, teachers liked A,
Yep, on the
but they
teacher
liked
forum.
that early start on the 1st. We were going to be really interested in what our parent advisory group says about that.
Right.
Teachers also like A because that intercession in October has all blue days, as opposed to, you turn it over to B, that intercession has some days that they work. So you can see why teachers preferred A, but we certainly want to balance that with what our parents say, and then we'll bring back that feedback to you, board, at first reading of what all of the groups have said, so you have that insight before you make your decision on that.
Thank you.
All right. Any further questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dillon. The third thing is an announcement first, and then I will need a recommendation for approval from the board. Clover School District is one of many, many school districts across the country. I was about to say the state. The state, yes, but the country as well, that has been a part of a government entity claim against JUUL. You may have seen in the newspaper where JUUL and other companies that produce vaping materials have been under some scrutiny. And so there was if you think about it like a class action lawsuit, it's very similar to that. Clover School District did join that because we have had many, many students impacted by JUUL. We've had to put in a lot of mitigations for that. And so we are now getting word that there is going to be a potential settlement. And so tonight I need approval from the board to give me authorization to enter into a settlement agreement on behalf of Clover School District when it is offered. Do you have any questions about that and any concern? No? Then I will just need an approval for authorization to act on the district's behalf for any potential settlement made or any paperwork that has to be signed with regard to the settlement.
Motion to approve that agreement.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Approved.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. All right, and then the last item tonight will be our discussion with Bethany enrollment, Bethany capacity, and what we can do about it as a district. I'm going to ask Dr. Hopkins to come forward and give some perspective. We had several members of the Bethany community who were able to join us at our first town hall. We had some that came back for second meeting and some that didn't get a chance to come back for the second meeting. So I want them to just review just a little bit, and then we will make the recommendation.
Oh, are we going to open
I thought we would do it at the end of the presentation.
at the end of the presentation before the vote?
I was going to ask, do you want me to make room at the end, make sure that we have the opportunity for some?
Yes, before they vote, they want to.
We do have some folks here tonight.
Fantastic.
All right, thank you. Good to see you again. I wanted to go over, just to kind of cover the bases once more of how we landed at our recommendation to the board tonight and some of the alternatives that we looked at, just to make sure that we hash those out completely. Just a quick review of the timeline. We began on the 13th talking about the capacity issue, a process, and a timeline. We've held a couple of town halls, town hall number 1 and number 2 at Larn. I'm not sure that should be number 2 at Larn, in a board business meeting with some public commentary in between that as well. And that brings us to tonight, where we will discuss once again and ask for an approval of our recommendation. Where we landed in our recommendation for movement of lines was what we had called the Faulkner extension. We met with the folks within this area during those town halls and have heard from them, heard some wonderful and very creative suggestions through the process, and we took some time to really look through those and investigate how those might look if they were to be implemented. In lieu of doing this, and I wanted to share those with you, to go through those once more and talk about what we found as the pros or cons of those. And I'll frame these, if we don't move forward on this, some of these may be mitigating strategies that may come into play as the administration progresses with the plan. One suggestion that we had was to freeze the attendance zone and allow new families that move into the Bethany zone to attend Larn until at which time space is available in there. This has worked well in districts with more confined attendance zones between schools, such as Fort Mill. One of the challenges for us would be, if we do a freeze, we are still responsible for transportation of those students. And as you can see, as highlighted by the blue here, and those students that are the new students that have moved in or will be moving in, you can see that the challenge for transportation would be pretty big. And we had Mr. Hunter with transportation talk about those challenges. So there were some prohibitive circumstances for this plan that we backed away from making this our recommendation. Suggestion 2 was to maintain the status quo, and I wanted to make sure that we understood what the consequences of that would be. What we have here is a chart. On the right are the number of students in each of those grade levels were we simply to stand pat and move up the current Bethany students to the next grade level. What would that look like if we made it work with a greater number of students at Bethany? And you can see we've got 3 areas that sort of give us a little concern. Classrooms that would begin at 22 and 25 before we add any growth, any potential growth would come in. We know we'll have 40 more pre-K students. We'll have 25, an additional kindergarten class. So we project just moving those students up, we will begin the year at 439 students. And if you remember our discussions regarding the capacity at Bethany, hopefully after January 1 will be either 460 with science lab or 480 without. So there is space on the way. With the anticipated growth, we looked at historically over the past few years and spoken with Ms. Guerin, about 16 new students each year over the past 3 years. So we would anticipate somewhere around that. If that trend continues, we would begin the year at a minimum of 455.
Just a clarification, that 16 new students is from the end of the school year to Labor Day. So that's your summer growth. That's not your whole year. That's just who tends to move in over the summer, given the last 3 years of data.
And if you remember, I shared some data from the closing of school 21-22 to, I believe it was March 13th of this year. There had been, I think it was 69 students into Bethany and then 30 back out for various reasons, for a net gain of just over 30 for Bethany this school year. But these summer enrollments are based on what Ms. Guerin sees from Labor Day until the start of the year, or excuse me, from the end of the year to Labor Day of next year. So as you can see, it does create a little bit of a circumstance here, and if new students move in, it would create a little more pressure in those classrooms that would already exist as at a starting point of these numbers here. Another suggestion, that was a very creative suggestion we looked at, the pre-K students who haven't established themselves in Bethany. It was thought that we wanted to look at what it would mean or what it would look like if we moved the pre-K students that were to attend Bethany to Larn and or Conard, where there may be space there, allowing the other students to remain. Certainly, as I mentioned, a very creative. There is space. There's one classroom, pre-K classroom available at Larn. As you can see on this map, the purple dots in the blue area are those students that by today's date, there will be more, those that have already pre-registered. Not all of these students may make it. There will be some more. As you know, it's an application process and you have to qualify, but by and large, the folks in Bethany do qualify. So you can see how spread out they are across the attendance zone. Here again, we do not require, or we are not required to provide transportation for pre-K, but we do allow pre-K students on established bus routes. So a move of the pre-K classes from Bethany to another venue would predicate parents providing their own transportation in many cases. That being said, this could be a temporary solution to create space, but it sort of kicks the can down the road a little bit, and it would be something we would decide if we needed to continue this. A concern from the district, not just in terms of the busing and the transportation, but just the access and the need that has been established in Bethany through the years of early intervention and early education in pre-K, how important that is, especially in a Title I school, and we certainly wouldn't want to minimize access or people taking advantage of that opportunity. But as I mentioned, another good option. Some other suggestions that were reviewed that were, for various reasons, logistically or otherwise, we weren't really able to pursue. Building a second floor onto the new addition. As you know, we were sort of down that road already. We broke ground at Bethany 2 weeks ago. They're currently getting the erosion control system in place to be able to start construction on the site. We had talked about the potential of purchasing land behind Bethany that is owned by the McCalls. I shared with the board that several years ago, Mr. Love had negotiated purchase of a small plot of land, which Bethany took over, but they have not shown any interest in selling land. And I think Mr. Love put it best. He said, "We came back to the house the same way we left." But certainly, I think in the future that would continue to be a point of discussion if the sentiments do change down the road. We talked about adding mobile units, and that's a viable option. We have used that at Oak Ridge. However, the circumstances at Bethany as we enter the school year with construction going on, the safety zones we need, the space we need for laydown areas, parking, et cetera, mobile units are not an option until construction is finished. It could potentially be an option once construction is cleared. There would be some space back there down the road for future addressing, but at this time it's just not possible to do to help address growth for the next year. And we also mentioned the possibility of moving the fifth grade to CMS, which causes some logistical problems. As you can imagine, moving one grade and a set of teachers and a whole new curriculum into a middle school that's designed for 6-8. And then it also brings with it the other capacity issues to Clover Middle School, where it would bring. So these were, although good suggestions, we did look through them and did not feel like they were very conducive to help address the issue that we're trying to address. I want to give this opportunity to the board, and if you want to open it up at this time to, I know there's a lot of concern about this, and rightfully so on every level, and we want to make sure that we have an opportunity for everybody to talk this out. So I'll open it up if there are some discussions or concerns that the board would like to share. I'm happy to help address them if I can, or at least present that opportunity.
Thank you. Open it to the audience first.
Okay. If there's anyone in the audience who would like to share any thoughts, or are you going to give it to me? Okay. If anyone would like to comment on the presentation or share any thoughts, additional thoughts or concerns, now is your opportunity. And we will just operate under our usual guidelines, which is 3 minutes.
Okay. Obviously, I'm a Bethany parent. You all have seen me at all of the meetings now. I do have a second and third grader there, rising third to fourth. We have been here because we do want to keep our kids at Bethany in any way possible. I understand that there's capacity issues, and you guys have a very tough choice ahead of you to decide what's going to happen. I think that there were some very good options as far as pre-K is not a requirement. My kids didn't go to pre-K. I would have loved them to go to Bethany at pre-K, and it didn't happen. So for us, yes, granted, having older kids, that seems like a good option to us. I also proposed at the last meeting changing the area, which I get is somewhat selfish of us saying, well, let's move these families instead of ours because we want to stay at Bethany, but these ones can go. And I understand that, and I really do. And I understand you have a very tough choice ahead of you. But with that being said, we would love to be at Bethany as long as we can. Also, we had talked about the new growth. That's right, I'm sorry. Thank you. New growth and new subdivisions. So instead of just taking us in this little itty bitty chunk and then having to move more kids later, why not move more kids now so that way they still have familiar faces? And I get that there's going to be a couple kids in every grade and whatnot, probably how it lays out. But why not take a bigger chunk now if you have to, instead of moving a little bit now, a little bit then, and a little bit later? It's like you said, kicking the can down the road. The proposed area that's going to move, I feel like that is kind of doing it. I know that they're adding more rooms, but Bethany is still also growing. As you guys said, so is all the other school districts. But at least it's an option, something else to look at, even though I know the votes tonight. And there's more room for growth at Lauren. I'm glad I brought him with me today. And as we discussed at one of the other meetings, Lauren does have more room for growth, more room for expansion where Bethany does not. So taking more kids now to Lauren seems more logical than just taking a few here and there all the time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was great without having any prep time, so we know we caught you spur of the moment.
Anyone else? Okay.
Are we discussing now?
So board, we have a proposal for this rezoning, and it's something that you've been spending about a month and a half kind of thinking through. So what questions, what discussion, what information would you like to share before a proposal is made?
Well, first of all, I'd just like to thank you and thank your team for trying to look at every option and for opening up to the public and allowing people to give suggestions and then doing the due diligence to try to get those facts to support what would work and what wouldn't work. So thank you for doing that.
I would also like to say, personally, no matter how this goes or what happens, all 7 of us have taken into consideration parents, teachers, administration, the district. Like this, that has been the forefront of everything we've talked about. So no matter how anyone votes, this is not like not worrying about one group versus another group or anything like that. It's been a very heavy topic. Redistricting is this first time most of us sitting here. I think Rob's the only one that's done it before. So, as a new board doing this is a new venture for us. It's very difficult. We were always told it was going to be the hardest thing we ever did, and it's true, even through COVID and a bond, a failed bond. This is very difficult. So I just don't want anyone to think that any decisions were made lightly.
I just echo that, Jessica. This has been here. Kieran and I have been here since November, and certainly had plenty of meetings and closed sessions, and the discussions around this have been easily the most emotionally charged for our group, and unfortunately for us, there's going to be more of this to come over the next 4 years. So this is not an easy topic to discuss. We get it. We understand. We have kids in the district too, and it's not an easy thing to discuss. So I would again thank you, Dr. Quinn, and Dr. Hopkins and your team, and thank our families too, because we've had several of these meetings and we've seen a lot of faces and hearts poured out. So we appreciate that, but that's part of what makes this so difficult to vote on, but it also makes us what makes us great too. So thank y'all for being involved in this.
And if I could add, I think something that I want everybody to know that you have been heard. This is not a subject that we have taken lightly by any stretch of the imagination. We all have been fielding phone calls, even as of this afternoon. We had a very spirited discussion before we came out this afternoon. And what I want to assure the parents, if I can, is that we all love Bethany, and I hope that you parents are aware and can be assured that regardless of what happens and where your child may end up, we love all of our schools in Clover School District, and your child will be loved and educated and fed and be welcomed as a part of a family of whatever school they may end up at. So we understand that Bethany is very unique, and it has a reputation that it is well earned over many, many years. But if your child unfortunately is one of the ones that has to possibly be relocated, we guarantee that they will be taken care of. And we hope everybody, because at the end of the day, that's what's really most important, is that we educate our children and we let them know that they're loved and cared for. So I just wanted to make sure everyone understood that.
Any other comments? I guess someone will need to make a motion to approve this recommendation. Is there a motion?
Yeah, motion to accept the administration's recommendation.
Is there?
Second.
Second. Discussion?
This will be a vote, yes or no, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, I think we've discussed a lot of options publicly, and so, yeah, I would like to be able to vote on this.
Okay, so all in favor, say yes.
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 All against, say no.
No.
No. So I guess the recommendation passes.
5-2. The recommendation passes. Yes, thank you very much. I would also like to add that I know how hard this is. I'm looking at some key supporters of Bethany families right here that I know that this is not what you wanted, but I promise you, we will work hard to work together and make this a good transition. And one of the things that Dr. Stein and her staff did when they were at Lauren and invited the Bethany families into Lauren was to reassure you that if you've got children in your same age from Bethany, that they will be in classes with kids that were moved from Bethany. That will, so that they start the year with a new set of friends, as well as some friends that they're familiar with. So we will absolutely make that happen. I also will echo that, we've got to solve the issue of space at our elementary schools. That is a very important issue that will be before this board, and it's going to take a very comprehensive plan to do that. We know that, and we are going to get to work on that right away. Board, do you have any other thoughts or questions? Thank you for your hard work on this. I know this has not been easy. I really appreciate that. At this point in time, Madam Vice Chair, that's the end of the board meeting.
Do I hear a motion to conclude, to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Second.